"Who fixed my armor?" the queen asked, then saw the human and froze. The morning sun spread pale light over the towering city of Xyrus, the capital of the Zyran Empire. Its spires and domes glittered, reflecting the strength and wealth of a civilization that had ruled the stars for centuries. Yet, within the grand palace, tension filled the air. Word had spread quickly that the queen's ceremonial armor, a symbol of her power and authority, had been damaged in the latest skirmish at the border worlds. That news alone had shaken the entire court. Queen Alysra moved through the corridors of the palace with her usual poise, though her steps were heavy with frustration. She was tall and regal, with eyes like polished silver, sharp and discerning. Her golden armor, now marred and battered, had been a gift from her mother, a piece infused with both advanced Zyran technology and centuries of family tradition. The armor was more than protection. It was a symbol of her right to rule. Seeing it in its damaged state made her blood boil. The royal engineers had tried to repair it, but even their most skilled hands failed. They muttered about the complexity of the alloy, about microfractures that only a human could fix, and about techniques beyond their training. They were careful not to voice any direct criticism of the queen, but their unease was clear. Whispers moved faster than any official messenger. One of the palace couriers, a small nervous figure in flowing robes, had already left to seek someone the court described as a human with unmatched skill. Far from the gleaming halls of the palace, in a quiet workshop near the city's outer edge, a human named Jaren worked in solitude. His space was a mess of tools, metal fragments, and half-finished projects, yet to him, it was perfect order. Jaren had been born on a small human colony far from the Empire's influence, a place where survival required intelligence, patience, and ingenuity. He had grown up learning to repair ships, engines, and machines that others considered impossible to fix. Word of his skill had traveled quietly, and now it had reached the highest levels of the Zyran court. A sealed message arrived just before dawn. It bore the royal insignia, a symbol that no human had reason to ignore. Jaren opened it carefully. The text was formal, direct, and chilling in its implication. "Your expertise is required to restore Queen Alysra's armor. Delay will not be tolerated." For a moment, Jaren hesitated. He was used to repairing old ships and engines, not working for royalty. The risk was high. Zyran politics were complex, and humans were often viewed as fragile or untrustworthy. But alongside the caution, a spark of curiosity ignited. This was an opportunity to test his skills against a challenge he had never faced before. Taking a deep breath, he packed his tools and set off toward the palace. The palace itself was a marvel of design, blending alien architecture with technology that defied gravity. Floating walkways connected towers, and energy fields shimmered over walls to protect against intruders. Guards in gleaming armor observed Jaren closely as he entered the outer courtyard. Humans were rare here, and the idea of one working on the queen's armor was nearly unthinkable to the Zyran elite. Their eyes followed him, skeptical and wary, as he carried only a small toolkit, his hands steady and unarmed. He was brought before the queen's damaged armor, laid out on a pedestal in a room flooded with light. The sight took Jaren's breath away. The armor was magnificent, even in its damaged state. Fractured plating, scorched metal, and shattered energy conduits told a story of the recent battle. He examined the fractures closely, noting details that even the palace engineers had missed. Some of the alloy had been weakened to the molecular level, cracks too fine for alien tools to detect. Yet to Jaren, it was a puzzle, a challenge that he relished. The court waited in tense silence, their whispers like a distant hum. Alysra herself observed from a balcony above, her posture perfect, though her eyes betrayed curiosity mixed with caution. She had ruled the empire for decades, faced wars, assassins, and rebellions, Yet she found herself intrigued by this human. Could he succeed where her finest engineers had failed? Her pride refused to admit she doubted him, yet a small knot of worry formed in her chest. Jaren set to work. His methods were different from those of the Zyran engineers. He used tools that combined human precision with alien technology, sometimes improvising, sometimes following procedures that seemed unusual to onlookers. Sparks flew as he repaired microfractures, reinforced plates, and carefully recalibrated the energy channels within the armor. He worked tirelessly, focused entirely on the task, undistracted by the whispers around him or the eyes that watched every movement. Hours passed. The room was filled with the scent of heated metal and ozone. Alisra moved closer, drawn by the steady rhythm of Jaren's work. Her silver eyes narrowed as she scrutinized every motion, expecting hesitation or mistake. But there was none. He worked as though he understood the armor, almost as if it spoke to him. Each repair, each adjustment brought the armor closer to perfection. The palace engineers leaned forward, their mouths slightly open, unsure whether to be impressed or embarrassed. They had never seen someone approach Zyran technology with such instinctive understanding. It was not just skill, it was insight, creativity, and precision combined. When Jaren finally finished, he stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. He gestured toward the completed armor. The plates gleamed under the palace lights, energy conduits perfectly aligned, microfractures sealed beyond detection. He had not only repaired the armor, he had improved it. The modifications were subtle but significant, enhancing strength and flexibility without altering its appearance. Alisra descended the balcony stairs slowly, each step measured, her gaze fixed on the armor. She reached out, her gloved hands hovering over the repaired pieces. Her fingers touched the surface, expecting to find a flaw, a weakness, anything to confirm that this human was not worthy of her trust. But there was none. The armor was flawless. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice low but carrying a weight that made everyone in the room tense. The question was not just about skill, it carried disbelief, respect, and a trace of astonishment. Jaren met her gaze without flinching. "I did," he said simply. "Your armor is stronger than before." The room fell silent. The court whispered among themselves, many unable to believe that a human had accomplished what Zyran engineers could not. Alisra's eyes remained fixed on him, her mind racing. There was something familiar about him, a recognition she could not yet place. His calm confidence, his skill, his presence, it stirred memories she thought were long buried. She stepped closer, circling the armor as she studied it, running her fingers lightly over the golden plates. Each movement revealed perfection. She turned to Jaren, and in that moment the weight of history seemed to shift. The queen who had ruled the stars, who had faced countless threats and adversaries, now felt a stirring of something she rarely experienced, amazement and curiosity directed at a human. The whispers of the court grew louder, though none dared speak directly to the queen. Some nodded to each other, acknowledging what they all had seen. A human, unarmed and alone, had repaired the armor of the ruler of the Zyran Empire, and not merely repaired it but perfected it. Jaren packed away his tools quietly, his work done, yet his calm remained. He did not boast, he did not demand praise, he simply waited. Alisra continued to study him, her silver eyes narrowing as recognition began to form. Something about this human seemed familiar. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories from years past, memories of battles fought, of allies and strangers. She remembered a human warrior many years ago who had saved her when all hope seemed lost, a human who had vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Could it be him? The question alone made her chest tighten. She was the queen, accustomed to control, to having answers, to knowing the paths of all who served her. And yet here, before her, stood a human who had not only challenged her expectations, but had restored a symbol of her authority in ways no one else could. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with a sense of awe she had not felt in years. The silence stretched between them. Finally she asked again, more deliberately, "Who fixed my armor?" Jaren simply met her gaze, steady and honest. There was no boast in his eyes, no fear, only recognition and quiet confidence. The queen froze, a realization slowly forming in her mind. The human before her was not just a stranger, not just an engineer. He was someone she had known, someone who had shaped her destiny long before. The court leaned forward, sensing the shift, though none could yet understand it. The queen, ruler of a galaxy-spanning empire, stood frozen in recognition, her mind recalling battles, rescues, and moments that now aligned with the presence of this human. A silent tension filled the room, heavy with anticipation. In that moment, Jaren was no longer merely a human working in a palace. He was a figure of change, of skill, of courage and quiet brilliance, and the queen realized that the galaxy itself might be about to change because of him. The morning sunlight reflected off the polished armor, casting patterns across the walls, a silent witness to the beginning of a story that would alter the course of the Zyran Empire forever. After the initial shock faded, the court slowly began to regain composure, though the tension in the room remained thick. Queen Alisra did not move immediately. She stood near the repaired armor, her silver eyes tracing the intricate work Jaren had done. Every curve, every seam, every energy conduit reflected perfection. She had spent decades perfecting her armor, overseeing every repair and upgrade herself, yet here was a human, a species she had long regarded as fragile and unpredictable, who had accomplished what even her top engineers could not. The whispers among the nobles grew louder. "Who is he?" one muttered. "A human in the palace," another whispered back. "I have never seen such skill. Not even the royal engineers could do this." They exchanged uneasy glances. In the Zyran Empire, humans were rare, often considered clever but unpredictable. To see one perform at such a high level challenged every assumption the court had about them. Jaren, for his part, remained calm. He did not bow excessively, nor did he try to impress anyone. He simply observed the armor, checking the alignment of the energy conduits and making minor adjustments here and there with a precision that was almost imperceptible. Every movement he made was deliberate, almost meditative, showing his deep understanding of the materials and technology before him. Queen Alisra finally spoke, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "You have repaired the armor and improved it. Tell me, human, how did you do this?" Jaren paused and looked up. "I studied the fractures first," he began simply. "Then I reinforced the weakened plating and realigned the energy conduits. The armor's alloy is strong, but the fractures were microscopic. Only careful observation and precise repair could restore it without causing further damage. I also made minor adjustments to increase flexibility without reducing protection." The queen raised an eyebrow. "And you did this without guidance from my engineers?" Jaren shook his head. "I used their work as reference, but the methods I applied are different. Human technology and techniques can sometimes approach problems from angles alien engineers do not consider." Alisra studied him for a long moment. His confidence was quiet, not arrogant, and his answers were straightforward. He spoke with honesty, yet there was an undercurrent of skill and experience that went beyond mere words. For centuries, humans had been underestimated in the galaxy. They were small in number compared to the mighty Zyrans, but they had a resilience, a creativity, and a problem-solving ability that often surprised more advanced species. The queen moved closer to inspect the armor herself. She lifted a gauntlet and rotated it in her hands. The plating was seamless, the energy channels perfectly aligned. She could feel the difference immediately. The armor was lighter, more responsive, yet stronger. Every subtle improvement spoke of a mind that understood both technology and strategy. "You may leave your tools here," she said finally, but you will remain in the palace. I want to observe your work further." Jaren inclined his head slightly. He was used to working quietly and independently, but he understood that in this environment, discretion was necessary. He set down his kit and began methodically inspecting the rest of the armor. Each piece required careful attention, as there were subtle flaws that only someone with his experience could detect. As he worked, he explained his reasoning quietly to the queen, who listened closely, absorbing every word. The palace engineers watched in silence. Some were envious, others cautious, and a few openly skeptical. They had been confident in their abilities, yet here was a human showing them methods they had never imagined. Some whispered to each other about the boldness of a human daring to work in the queen's presence, yet none interrupted. The queen's attention made it clear that Jaren's work was not to be questioned. As the hours passed, Jaren's quiet diligence began to leave an impression on Alisra. She had faced countless threats in her life, rebellions, assassins, invasions, but this human fascinated her in a different way. He did not seek glory, he did not demand recognition, and yet his abilities and insight surpassed many who had spent a lifetime in the Zyran court. His presence was a reminder that the galaxy was larger and more complex than even the Empire's most careful scholars could predict. Finally, after what seemed like endless adjustments, Jaren stepped back. He ran a final diagnostic on the armor using a small handheld device, and a soft hum confirmed that every system was functioning perfectly. The queen watched silently, her mind racing with both admiration and recollection. Something about him seemed familiar, though she could not yet place it. His hands, the way he moved, the quiet certainty of his actions, all of it stirred a memory from years ago. Before she could speak, the room was filled with the sound of her personal heralds announcing the arrival of other nobles. They had been summoned to witness the completion of the armor, and now they filled the chamber, their eyes wide at the sight of the human standing beside the flawless suit. Murmurs of disbelief and amazement spread throughout the room. One elder engineer finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "Your Majesty, I have seen many skilled individuals in my life, but I have never witnessed such precision, such understanding. Even the most advanced Zyran techniques were enhanced by his work." Alisra nodded slowly. "Indeed, his work is flawless." Her gaze returned to Jaren, who met her eyes without hesitation. For a brief moment, the room was silent, all attention focused on the human who had repaired the queen's armor. Then, as if recalling something long buried, Alisra's expression shifted. A memory came to her, a battlefield years ago, far from the palace. She had been caught in an ambush, her forces overwhelmed, her life in danger. Only one human had appeared amidst the chaos, acting with skill, courage, and decisiveness to save her. The human had vanished as quickly as he had arrived, leaving her to wonder if it had been a dream. Could this be the same human? Her heart quickened. The realization left her momentarily frozen. The court noticed the change, but none dared ask. They could feel that something profound had passed between the queen and the human, though they could not yet understand it. Alisra's pride, her control, her usual composure, all were tempered by a sudden, unspoken recognition. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "You are not merely skilled, human," she said softly, "but familiar. Have we met before?" Jaren tilted his head slightly, studying her with calm intensity. There was no boast, no pretense, only a quiet acknowledgement of her words. He did not answer immediately, allowing the moment to hang in the air, giving her time to connect the memory. Finally, he spoke. "Years ago on a distant battlefield, I assisted a Zyran leader who was in danger. That leader was you, Your Majesty." His words were simple, but the weight carried through the room. Alisra's silver eyes widened. The recognition hit her fully now. It was him. The human who had saved her life years ago was standing before her, calm, composed, and undeniably brilliant. The armor, the skill, the quiet confidence, All of it now made perfect sense. The nobles and engineers exchanged astonished glances. A human, rare, underestimated, often considered fragile, had not only repaired the queen's armor but had also returned to the palace years later. His presence alone was a statement, challenging everything the Zyran Empire thought it knew about humanity. Alysra stepped closer, her voice firmer now but still carrying an edge of wonder. "You are the one who saved me before. I did not expect to see you here again." Jaren nodded. "I have returned, Your Majesty. Circumstances brought me to the palace, and I am here to serve in any way I can." For the first time in many years, Alysra smiled, not the formal, controlled smile of a queen, but a genuine one. It was a smile that acknowledged skill, courage, and loyalty. She realized that humans, long underestimated, possessed qualities that even the most advanced alien civilizations could not ignore. The tension in the room began to ease. The court, seeing the queen's reaction, understood that this human was no ordinary visitor. He was a force of change, capable of reshaping expectations and altering the future. The palace engineers, humbled by his skill, quietly returned to their workstations, eager to learn from him rather than compete. Jaren remained by the armor, making minor adjustments and ensuring every component was perfect. He worked silently, letting the queen observe him. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and thoughtful. There was no hurry, no showmanship, only the steady application of skill and intelligence. Alysra watched him, her mind processing both the present and the past. She had faced countless challenges as queen, yet she found herself fascinated by this human. He embodied a combination of ingenuity, courage, and humility that was rare in the galaxy. His presence reminded her that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the most unexpected allies were the most valuable. Hours passed as the queen and the human worked together, examining the armor and discussing subtle improvements. The court remained attentive but silent, witnessing a collaboration that was as extraordinary as it was unprecedented. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the armor was not only repaired, it was enhanced, a testament to human ingenuity and the quiet brilliance that Jaren brought to his work. Finally, Alysra stepped back, satisfied. She looked at Jaren with a mix of respect and something else, an acknowledgement of the bond that had been formed long ago and now rekindled. "You have done more than repair my armor," she said softly. "You have reminded me that there is much about this galaxy that I still do not know, and perhaps much about humans that I have underestimated." Jaren nodded, quietly accepting her words. There was no pride, no arrogance, only the calm presence of someone who understood their purpose and fulfilled it with skill and care. The room remained silent for a moment, everyone aware that they had witnessed something remarkable. A human had repaired the armor of the Zyran Queen, and in doing so had reshaped perceptions, challenged assumptions, and perhaps even altered the course of the empire. As the evening light faded, the queen and the human stood together, side by side, a quiet understanding passing between them. The armor gleamed in the dim glow, a symbol not only of the queen's authority but of the extraordinary potential of a species that had long been underestimated. The future, Alysra realized, was about to change, and the human at her side would play a central role in that change. The following morning, the palace was alive with quiet anticipation. Word of the human's remarkable repair of the queen's armor had already spread, and though the court remained cautious, many could not help but feel curiosity about the man who had impressed even Queen Alysra herself. Humans were often underestimated, their strength and intelligence overlooked by most alien species. But this one, Jaren, had already proven that the assumptions about his kind could be disastrously wrong. Queen Alysra moved through the halls with a newfound purpose. She had spent much of her life surrounded by skilled advisors and engineers. Yet none had ever demonstrated the kind of calm intelligence and ingenuity that Jaren possessed. His presence brought a subtle shift in her awareness, a realization that sometimes the galaxy's most remarkable capabilities lay not in the most advanced species, but in those who had adapted, survived, and thrived against impossible odds. Jaren had been given quarters near the palace workshop, a modest space compared to the vast halls the queen occupied, but it was sufficient for him to continue his work. He organized his tools carefully, checking every piece of equipment, preparing for the tasks that awaited him. Today, he was not simply repairing the armor. He was preparing for the more difficult challenge of improving the palace's defensive systems. The Queen had requested his insight on energy shields, starship defenses, and even structural reinforcements of key palace towers. The palace engineers approached him cautiously, still unsure how to react. Some bowed politely, while others kept their distance, wary of the human whose abilities had already challenged their understanding of technology. Jaren acknowledged them with calm nods, his demeanor composed and unassuming. He did not seek recognition, nor did he attempt to assert dominance. His work was its own statement. Queen Alisra arrived shortly after, observing Jaren as he examined the designs for the palace's outer shields. Her curiosity was now mingled with something deeper: recognition, respect, and the faint stirrings of trust that had been hard-earned over her many years as a ruler. She approached quietly, careful not to disturb him. "You have a method that is unusual," she said, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Explain it to me." Jaren looked up, his hands steady. "The shields are designed to absorb energy from attacks, but their efficiency can be improved if the energy channels are reconfigured. The human method emphasizes redistribution rather than absorption. It reduces strain on critical components and improves durability over time. I also recommend adding secondary fail-safes that can redirect energy in case of overloads." The Queen studied him carefully. His words were precise, deliberate, and well-considered. Unlike many who sought to impress her with grand claims or technical jargon, Jaren spoke plainly, yet every statement carried insight beyond what the palace engineers had considered. Alisra could see the value immediately. The engineers exchanged nervous glances. One whispered, "He speaks of methods we have never applied. He is improving our defenses as we speak." Alisra remained silent, allowing Jaren to continue. Hours passed as he worked alongside the engineers, explaining his approach step by step. He demonstrated techniques that combined human ingenuity with Zyran technology, showing how subtle adjustments could yield dramatic improvements. The engineers, though initially skeptical, began to follow his lead, adapting their work to incorporate his suggestions. As the day wore on, Alisra observed quietly, occasionally asking questions, often prompting discussions about strategy and design. She noted how Jaren's approach emphasized practicality, adaptability, and foresight. Every decision he made considered not just immediate repair or improvement, but long-term resilience. It was a perspective she had rarely encountered among her own people, and it intrigued her. By mid-afternoon, the first tests of the modified energy shields were underway. The palace courtyard was cleared, and Jaren oversaw the calibration process. Light beams and energy pulses struck the shields, testing their capacity to absorb and redirect force. The results exceeded expectations. The shields were stronger, more flexible, and able to withstand energy bursts that had previously threatened to penetrate the palace's defenses. The court watched in awe. Even the most experienced engineers could not hide their astonishment. Some nodded to each other, silently acknowledging that the human had introduced innovations beyond their understanding. It was rare to witness such a combination of skill, insight, and practical wisdom, and the realization left many unsettled. Alisra remained near Jaren, her attention focused on the process. She noted how calmly he directed the adjustments, how he anticipated potential weaknesses, and how his quiet confidence inspired those around him to perform at their best. There was no arrogance in his demeanor, only competence and clarity of purpose. When the tests concluded successfully, Alisra approached him. "Your methods are remarkable. You have not only repaired what was damaged but enhanced it beyond expectation." Jaren inclined his head slightly. "It is my understanding of the systems and the materials that allows for such adjustments. The key is observation, precision, and anticipating outcomes before they occur. I do not claim perfection, but improvements are always possible if one considers every variable carefully." The Queen studied him, her mind racing with the implications. A human who had saved her life years ago was now demonstrating a level of skill and strategic insight that could reshape not only her palace's defenses, but potentially the security of her entire empire. It was both thrilling and unsettling. Over the following days, Jaren's presence in the palace became more prominent. He worked tirelessly, often from dawn to dusk, improving systems, repairing damaged structures, and consulting on starship designs. Each project he undertook revealed a new layer of understanding and creativity. The court, though initially skeptical, began to respect him. Even those who had doubted humans found themselves observing quietly, learning from his methods and techniques. Alisra, for her part, continued to watch and learn. She had always been a ruler who valued intelligence and initiative, yet Jaren's approach challenged her in unexpected ways. He combined practicality with ingenuity, intuition with experience. His presence was a reminder that the galaxy was not defined solely by size, power, or tradition, but by adaptability, courage, and skill. One evening, as the sun set behind the spires of Xyrus, Alisra approached Jaren while he worked on a schematic for a new energy redistribution system. The room was quiet, filled only with the hum of equipment and the faint clink of metal as he adjusted a component. "You have a calmness that is unusual," she said softly. "Even under pressure, you maintain focus and clarity." Jaren looked up, meeting her gaze. "Experience teaches that panic rarely solves anything. Calm observation and careful action are more effective, even in life-or-death situations. Humans learn this early, as survival often depends on it." Alisra nodded, absorbing his words. She reflected on the battlefield memory that had first connected her to him, realizing that this same calm, practical courage had saved her life years ago. The connection between past and present was undeniable, and she felt a growing trust in his abilities, as well as a deeper respect for his character. As days turned into weeks, Jaren's influence in the palace grew. He became more than a repairman or consultant. He became a strategist, an innovator, and a quiet force shaping the defense and efficiency of the Queen's empire. Alisra sought his counsel on matters of security, logistics, and even diplomacy, recognizing that his perspective was often unique, unencumbered by tradition or prejudice. The nobles continued to watch, some with admiration, others with wariness. It was rare for an outsider, especially a human, to earn such trust and respect from the Queen. But Jaren's consistent skill, honesty, and dedication gradually won over even the most skeptical observers. He did not demand recognition, yet his results spoke volumes. One afternoon, as Jaren completed a series of modifications to the palace's main energy conduits, Alisra approached him with a new request. "I have received reports of unrest on the border worlds. The defenses we have are strong, but I need your assessment of how to reinforce them without alarming the population." Jaren studied the schematics carefully. "We can improve efficiency by reinforcing key nodes and redistributing energy in a way that strengthens the perimeter without signaling aggressive intent. Subtle adjustments can enhance protection while maintaining stability and calm among the inhabitants." Alisra considered his words, noting the clarity and precision of his reasoning. "You have a remarkable ability to see both immediate and long-term effects," she said. "It is a skill that many Zyrans, myself included, often overlook." Jaren shrugged modestly. "It is simply careful observation and understanding. One must anticipate not only what is visible, but also what might occur under different circumstances." The Queen smiled faintly, recognizing the quiet brilliance in his approach. She realized that Jaren was more than a human with technical skill. He was a thinker, a strategist, and a partner in ways she had not anticipated. His presence challenged her assumptions, broadened her perspective, and reminded her that the galaxy was full of potential she had yet to fully understand. As evening descended on the palace, Alisra and Jaren stood together, reviewing the final modifications for the day. The armor, the shields, and the palace systems all reflected his careful, methodical touch. The court had begun to whisper, noting how much the Queen relied on his insight, and how much influence a single human could wield simply through skill, intelligence, and quiet dedication. In that moment, Alisra felt a deep sense of realization. Humans, she thought, were far more capable than she had ever believed. Their ingenuity, adaptability, and courage were qualities that could rival or even surpass those of the most advanced alien civilizations. And Jaren, who had once saved her life, was now proving it in ways that affected her entire empire. The sun set over Zyrus, casting long shadows across the palace courtyard. Within the walls, a new understanding had formed, a bond between a queen and a human, built not on loyalty demanded or orders given, but on mutual respect, skill, and shared purpose. It was a quiet revolution, subtle yet powerful, and its effects would ripple through the empire in ways that none could yet predict. The human had arrived to repair an armor, yet he had accomplished far more than that. He had challenged assumptions, demonstrated the extraordinary potential of his species, and earned a place not only in the palace but in the Queen's trust. Alisra, once certain that humans were limited by their size and number, now understood that they were a force capable of shaping the galaxy in ways even she had never imagined. And as Jaren continued his work, unaware of the full impact he had on those around him, the Queen could not help but feel a quiet anticipation for what the future might hold. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and full of possibilities. And with a human like Jaren by her side, she realized that even the most impossible obstacles could be overcome. The following weeks in the palace brought a rhythm that was unusual for both the court and Queen Alisra herself. Jaren, the human, had become a quiet force of change. He moved among the engineers, the advisors, and the soldiers with calm authority, not through rank or command, but through skill and insight. His presence had shifted the dynamics of the palace subtly yet unmistakably. For the first time in decades, Alisra felt as though her court was not only under her rule but capable of growth beyond tradition, guided by fresh perspective and ingenuity. Every morning, Jaren worked at his station in the workshop, meticulously reviewing the palace's systems, from the energy conduits to the starship docking protocols. He adjusted shield configurations, reinforced key structural supports, and suggested improvements that increased efficiency without disrupting the delicate balance of palace operations. Engineers who had once scoffed at the idea of human ingenuity now leaned closer, watching him work and silently learning from each careful adjustment. Alisra often lingered nearby, observing his methods. She did not interrupt or comment frequently, preferring instead to absorb the reasoning behind his every move. It was a different kind of learning, watching someone act instinctively yet with calculated thought. Jaren never boasted or sought praise, but his results spoke louder than any words. One afternoon, she approached him while he was examining a set of schematics for the palace's energy grid. The hum of the machinery filled the air, punctuated only by the occasional clang of metal as Jaren made a minor adjustment. "You seem to anticipate problems before they occur," she said quietly. "Even when the engineers miss something, you see it immediately." Jaren looked up, a small, polite smile forming on his lips. Experience teaches observation and anticipation. Systems often fail not because of design, but because of overlooked possibilities. Identifying those possibilities early prevents failure and increases efficiency. The Queen considered his words carefully. Humans had lived for centuries in environments far less forgiving than the palaces of the Zyran Empire. They adapted, learned, and survived. That adaptability, combined with intelligence and calm under pressure, made humans formidable allies and, in some ways, unpredictable threats. Alisra had once underestimated them, as many in her court did, but Jaren was proving her wrong in ways that could not be ignored. That evening, a simulation was conducted to test the newly enhanced energy shields and defensive protocols across the palace. Soldiers, engineers, and advisors gathered in the control room, anticipation thick in the air. Alisra stood beside Jaren, her silver eyes scanning the data streaming across the monitors. The simulation began with a barrage of energy pulses directed at the palace's shields. The previous configuration had been robust but predictable. Jaren's adjustments, however, redistributed energy dynamically, allowing the shields to absorb impact in some areas while redirecting excess energy to fortified nodes. The result was a resilience far beyond the original design. Every pulse of energy was absorbed, every potential breach accounted for, and the palace remained fully protected. The court gasped. Some engineers muttered phrases of disbelief. Soldiers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Alisra, however, remained calm, though her mind raced with the implications. Humans, she thought, were capable of innovations that could rival centuries of Zyran technology when given the right circumstances and freedom to think creatively. When the simulation ended successfully, Alisra addressed the gathered court. "These results are not just proof of skill," she said. "They are proof that a fresh perspective can strengthen what we thought unbreakable. We have much to learn, and it is clear that humans, when trusted and guided correctly, offer knowledge and insight that may surpass even our most accomplished engineers." The murmurs among the court shifted from skepticism to admiration. They began to see Jaren not as a human outsider, but as a valued contributor to the Empire's strength. Even those who had initially doubted him could not deny the results. Over the following days, Jaren continued to refine and enhance the palace's systems. He adjusted starship docking procedures, streamlined maintenance schedules, and even proposed modifications to the training programs for soldiers and engineers. Each suggestion carried the same calm logic and practical foresight he had shown since arriving. Slowly, the palace itself began to operate more efficiently. Alisra found herself consulting him on matters beyond engineering. Questions of strategy, security, and diplomacy found their way to his attention, and he offered insights that were often overlooked by her advisors. His approach was simple: assess the problem, consider all possible outcomes, and act decisively based on observation and reasoning. There was no politics in his advice, no desire for personal gain, only clarity and effectiveness. One evening, after a long day of adjustments and consultations, Alisra invited Jaren to walk with her through the palace gardens. The air was warm, scented with alien flowers, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and silver. It was a rare moment of calm amidst the flurry of activity within the palace. "You have changed much in a short time," Alisra said quietly. "The palace functions differently because of your presence. You do not seek authority, yet your influence is undeniable." Jaren nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I do what I can where it is needed. Systems, structures, and processes can always improve. The key is to act with understanding and foresight." Alisra studied him, noticing something deeper in his demeanor, a confidence rooted not in ego, but in experience and competence. Humans, she realized, possessed a resilience and intelligence that was rare even among advanced civilizations. Their adaptability, creativity, and quiet determination made them formidable, though their value was often underestimated. As they walked, Alisra reflected on the battlefield years ago, where Jaren had saved her life. At the time, she had not fully understood the significance of his actions, nor had she realized that humans like him could rise to challenges that even the most advanced species might struggle with. Now, seeing him in the palace, she recognized the full extent of his abilities and character. The days continued with Jaren implementing improvements, overseeing simulations, and guiding engineers. Soldiers trained under revised protocols that emphasized both strategy and adaptability. The palace systems became more robust, more flexible, and more responsive. Every improvement was a testament to human ingenuity, but also to Jaren's quiet leadership and insight. Alisra began to notice changes in herself as well. She was accustomed to commanding with certainty, relying on her experience and the counsel of her court. Yet Jaren's presence encouraged her to consider perspectives she had previously overlooked. She found herself thinking more broadly, questioning assumptions, and appreciating solutions born from insight rather than tradition. One day, during a review of the palace's outer defenses, Alisra approached Jaren with a question that had been on her mind. "Do you see threats differently than we do?" she asked. Jaren looked thoughtful. "Perhaps. Humans often face challenges that require adaptability and improvisation. We learn to anticipate consequences and prepare for outcomes that may not be obvious. That approach can complement more traditional strategies, providing resilience and flexibility." Alisra nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She realized that humans, long underestimated by her empire, could offer solutions beyond the reach of even the most skilled Zyran engineers. Jaren was proof of that, and his presence was transforming not only the palace but her perspective as a ruler. As evening fell, Alisra observed the city from the palace balcony. The streets below were quiet, the lights reflecting off polished metal and glass. She felt a sense of calm and confidence, knowing that the palace, its people, and even the empire's defenses were stronger because of this human who had quietly earned her trust. Jaren joined her, standing beside her without speaking. They looked out over the city together, a shared understanding passing silently between them. He had arrived simply to repair armor, yet his impact was far greater than anyone had anticipated. Alisra finally broke the silence. "You have done more than repair what was broken," she said softly. "You have strengthened the palace, guided my people, and reminded me that strength can come from unexpected places." Jaren inclined his head, acknowledging her words. "It is my intention only to be of service where it is needed," he said simply. The queen studied him, her thoughts turning to the future. With humans like him, the empire could face challenges it had never imagined. Their ingenuity, resilience, and insight could reshape not only the palace but the entire galaxy. She realized that she had underestimated humans for far too long, and that their potential was greater than she had ever known. As the night deepened, the palace settled into quiet, but the impact of Jaren's work resonated through its walls. The engineers and soldiers who had watched him learned lessons they would carry for years. The queen herself felt a subtle shift within her, a growing appreciation for intelligence, ingenuity, and courage that transcended species. In that quiet moment, Alisra recognized that this human was more than a repairman or consultant. He was a catalyst, a reminder that even the smallest or seemingly insignificant individuals could shape the future when given opportunity, trust, and responsibility. The palace was stronger, the queen wiser, and the court forever changed. And in the heart of it all stood a human who had arrived simply to repair armor, yet had become something far greater, a symbol of innovation, courage, and the untapped potential of humanity. The days following the successful enhancements to the palace defenses were filled with quiet anticipation. Word had spread throughout the empire that a human had achieved what the finest Zyran engineers could not, and many in the court were both intrigued and cautious. Humans had long been underestimated, their small numbers and unfamiliar ways often dismissed as inferior. Yet Jaren had demonstrated intelligence, skill, and foresight that rivaled the greatest minds of the empire. The queen herself observed him closely, seeing not only his talent, but also the calm judgment and courage that had once saved her life years ago. Alice recalled a meeting of her closest advisors and engineers in the central strategy room. The air was tense with expectation. Jaren stood beside her, quietly observing the gathered council. Every eye in the room was on him, a mixture of awe, skepticism, and curiosity. This was the moment where his influence would be formally acknowledged, and his strategies would be considered seriously by the Empire. Humans are often underestimated, Alisra began, her voice calm but firm. Yet this one has demonstrated skill, ingenuity, and insight that surpasses expectation. His contributions have strengthened the palace, the city, and our defenses. He has earned not only my trust but the respect of all who have observed his work. From this moment forward, his counsel will be valued in matters of strategy, defense, and innovation. Whispers ran through the council. Some nodded quietly, while others exchanged wary glances. The declaration was unprecedented. A human, an outsider, a species long regarded as secondary, was now given influence in the heart of the Zyran Empire. Yet the results spoke for themselves, and the Queen's authority was absolute. Jaren remained silent, accepting the recognition without arrogance. He understood the significance of Alisra's words, but did not seek them for personal gain. His purpose had always been simple: to repair, improve, and serve where his skills were needed. Yet he now realized the wider impact of his actions. The decisions he made could shape not only the palace but the future of the empire itself. Over the next several days, Jaren worked alongside the engineers and strategists, implementing further improvements. He introduced systems for rapid energy redistribution, automated emergency protocols, and reinforced starship docking procedures. Each modification was carefully explained, with his reasoning laid out clearly for all to understand. Alisra observed closely, asking questions and offering insight, while the court adapted to the quiet authority of the human at their side. A sudden alert interrupted the routine one afternoon. Scouts reported an approaching fleet from a neighboring system, one known for its aggressive stance and history of raids. The palace defenses were robust, yet the threat demanded immediate evaluation and strategic planning. Alice returned to Jaren. "We need your assessment," she said, her tone measured. "Can we defend the palace without endangering the city?" Jaren studied the holographic projection of the incoming fleet, tracing their formations, weapons output, and predicted maneuvers. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. "We can defend the palace effectively," he said. "The key is to focus on their fleet's approach vector and exploit their predictable engagement patterns. We must prioritize shield allocation and energy distribution to critical nodes while keeping civilians safe. Diversions can delay their advance and allow us to concentrate firepower where it is most effective." The council listened intently as he outlined a step-by-step defense plan. Every suggestion was practical, precise, and based on careful observation. Alisra could see the logic and experience behind his decisions, the same insight that had allowed him to repair her armor and strengthen the palace defenses. Orders were given, energy shields recalibrated, and soldiers positioned according to Jaren's instructions. The tension in the palace was palpable, yet there was a sense of confidence that had not existed before. The queen and her council trusted the human's judgment, and the soldiers trusted the improved systems he had implemented. As the enemy fleet approached, energy beams streaked across space, lighting the sky with pulses of power. The shields held firm, redirecting energy efficiently as Jaren had designed. Starships in the palace fleet executed coordinated maneuvers, exploiting gaps in the enemy formation. Every calculation he had made worked seamlessly in practice. Alysra watched from the command balcony, her heart steady despite the chaos below. Humans were often underestimated, yet here one stood as a central figure in the defense of the Empire. The realization was profound. Jaren was more than a repairman. He was a strategist, a force multiplier, and a symbol of human ingenuity that no alien could ignore. The enemy fleet struggled against the palace's defenses. Energy shields absorbed or redirected blasts that would have otherwise penetrated the walls. Starships executed maneuvers with near-perfect coordination, disrupting enemy formations. The humans' plans worked flawlessly, and the attackers, faced with unexpected resistance, began to falter. In the palace, the council murmured in disbelief. Engineers who had once doubted Jaren now openly praised his strategy, acknowledging the brilliance of his foresight. Soldiers exchanged relieved glances, recognizing that their lives and the safety of the palace rested on the guidance of a human. The queen stepped forward, her silver eyes focused and steady. She addressed the council, her voice carrying authority and admiration. This is the result of insight, skill, and calm judgment. Do not underestimate the value of those who think differently, who approach problems with creativity and courage. Jaren has shown us the strength of humanity, and we are stronger because of it. The enemy fleet, unable to break through, eventually retreated. The palace remained unscathed, and the city below was safe. Cheers erupted from soldiers and engineers alike, though Alysra remained composed, her attention still on the human who had orchestrated the defense. Jaren, as always, stood quietly, observing the results. He did not seek applause, yet he acknowledged the relief and respect of those around him. His calm demeanor was steady, even in the aftermath of battle. Alysra approached him, placing a hand briefly on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and recognition. "You have done more than I could have imagined," she said softly. "You have strengthened the palace, defended the city, and reminded me of the value of seeing beyond assumptions." Jaren inclined his head. "It is my purpose to serve where skill and observation can make a difference," he replied. "The outcome reflects the efforts of many, not just my own." The queen smiled, recognizing both the humility and the quiet power in his words. Humans, she realized, were capable of remarkable things when given opportunity, trust, and responsibility. Jaren's presence had altered not only the defenses of the palace, but the perceptions of the entire court. The Zyran Empire had underestimated humanity for too long, and now the truth was undeniable. In the following days, Jaren continued his work, consolidating improvements and training engineers and soldiers in his methods. The palace became a hub of innovation and efficiency, a place where traditional approaches met fresh perspectives, and where humans and Zyrans collaborated in ways previously unimagined. Alysra oversaw the progress with quiet pride, knowing that the Empire's future was brighter because of the human who had arrived simply to repair armor. One evening, as the sun set and painted the city in shades of gold and silver, Alysra and Jaren stood together on the balcony. The palace was calm, the city safe, and the systems he had improved ran smoothly. For the first time, the queen allowed herself a moment of reflection. "You have done more than repair what was broken," she said softly. "You have changed the palace, the court, and perhaps even the way I see the galaxy." Jaren looked out over the city, his expression calm. "It is my hope that small actions, careful observation, and thoughtful decisions can have a lasting impact. Strength is not always measured by size or power, but by adaptability, intelligence, and determination. Alysra nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and respect. Humans, she realized, were more capable than she had ever imagined. Jaren had not only proven their potential but had demonstrated that courage, insight, and skill could reshape the future of an entire empire. The night deepened, and the palace settled into quiet. Within its walls, a new understanding had formed, a bond between the queen and the human, built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. The court, the engineers, and the soldiers had all witnessed the extraordinary abilities of a species long underestimated. The Zyran Empire had gained more than a skilled engineer. It had gained a symbol of human ingenuity, resilience, and potential. As Alysra looked out over the city one last time that evening, she realized that the galaxy was full of possibilities yet to be discovered. With humans like Jaren, no challenge was insurmountable, no threat unbeatable, and no assumption beyond question. The Empire was stronger, its defenses secure, and its people inspired by a new perspective that bridged species, cultures, and centuries of tradition. And Jaren, who had arrived to repair a single suit of armor, had become something far greater, a catalyst for change, a reminder of human potential, and a quiet hero whose impact would be felt for years to come. The stars above Zyrus glimmered in the night sky, silent witnesses to a story of courage, skill, and ingenuity that had begun with a single act of repair and ended with the promise of a brighter, stronger future. The queen and the human stood together, side by side, knowing that this was only the beginning of a partnership that could shape the destiny of the empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself.